Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to cover 8 tips on how to double your rate as a website designer. So when I originally was thinking about this video, I thought maybe 3 to 5 ideas would be great, but I actually came up with 8, and I'm going to cover all 8 now. As always, there will be timestamps down below for you to access, to skip around, go to any of the points you want to directly, and just value your time overall. So let's begin. First, this is the one that impacted me the most, and I hope it does the same for you. When you are doing a first consultation with a client, learning more about the project, what they want to do, what they want to accomplish, all of that, ask the question, what budget do you have for this project? There's variations of that. What budget do you have in mind? What is your budget? Any of those work. So let's do a quick little role play. You'll ask, what budget do you have in mind for this project? The client may say, I don't know. How much does something like this normally cost? You could come back and say something like this. Well, let me ask you, have you ever done a project like this before or a freelance project similar to this? And they may say, yeah, I hired someone once to do a side project for me on Fiverr. It kind of worked out, it kind of didn't. At this point, you could come back to the client and ask them more about the project, learn more about how it went. Did they just pay $200 and get a project that they actually didn't really like? How did that go? Learn more about the client's experience. In that process, you can also vet the client's understanding and clarity on what they're looking for, what they've done before, and where they're headed. All of this affects price. But first and foremost, you ask them, what budget do you have in mind? You want them to say numbers before you say numbers. And the reason is you just get a clear sense of where they're thinking. I was thinking $700. Or I was thinking about $5,000 to $7,000. Because, and this is a point I'll make later in more detail, this is very much a range. Website design, branding, all of that is a range. It doesn't work as a perfect formula, and there's multiple reasons why. We're going to cover a few of them now, but the first main tip is ask before you tell. And if you have to share numbers, I have 2 tips for you. The first one is this. Share numbers with the highest number first, and then the lowest number. People always anchor to the highest number, so share that number first. So if you're gonna say, well, a project like this usually goes for a range between 12K to 5K. Do you see how I started at the top and then went down? It's one of those things, it anchors them. It's a really interesting psychological thing. You could look up other stuff on the internet about it, but basically start with the higher number first and then go down to the lower number. Then you could start the conversation further. By the end of that call, you definitely want to finalize where they are at in that budget, if they are in that budget, and if they're not in that budget, where they are overall. You want to make sure you understand exactly where they are before the call ends. That's probably an important thing to say, actually, as we're talking about this. All right, let's go to the next one. Realize that you are not only selling design, you are also selling a customer experience. What do I mean? Well, the way you interact with a client, if you are staying, let's say, at a 5-star hotel, or if you're staying at a 2-star hotel, well, that experience is going to be completely different. They basically offer the same thing, a bed, a place to stay, a lock on the door, but the levels of service are going to be completely different. So keep in mind that if you have great customer service, that is part of your rate. Try to understand what type of business the client is in and their business model. Next, realize what industry the client is in, their typical client, and where they operate from. For example, if the client is a brand new cleaners, they might not have a big budget. But if they are a luxury firm in the middle of the Hamptons, well, that might be a different case. The needs of the client will vary, and the pricing and the budget and the scope will vary, so it's worth keeping that in mind while you are having that conversation with the client. Number 4, this is kind of like a backwards tip, but be very mindful of this. Sometimes clients will bet on future work to offer you a smaller upfront price. They'll say something like, hey, we just need this up. We need the best possible for the smallest amount of money, but in the future, we're going to hit you up for more work. I have never bet on that, never will bet on that. I'll be kind to the client when they say that, but for the most part, that truly, I don't know, doesn't really work out. It's worked out once or twice, but for the most part, I never bet on that in a project. So if the client's saying, hey, could we do $500 or $1,500 less on this project? In the future, there's gonna be a lot more work. I never work on that. And that's just one way to make sure your rate is proper. You don't want to undercharge because of a future hope on a project that may never come. Number 5, now this is a big one. And if you come from a corporate environment or you come from an hourly environment or your parents worked in hourly jobs their whole life, whatever it might be, this is going to be an important one. Realize you are not selling your time, you are selling your expertise. And be humble about that. This is what I mean. First and foremost, you are not selling your time. It doesn't matter if it takes you 20 hours to build a website, 50 hours to build a website, or if it takes you 3 hours. What matters is your expertise, what you know about bringing a project like this to life and helping the client take the next step in their business by building the website. But also, I recommend be humble because your expertise needs to be there. You want to be at a place where you actually are, not where you think you are. Obviously grow, get better, all of that. But if this is your 4th website, don't expect to charge 10 times more than your previous website, especially if the expertise is not there yet. It will come, be patient, but be realistic about where you are currently. And the reason I say this is because sometimes as website designers, we can compare ourselves to other designers. And we could see one person charging $150 an hour while we're charging $40 an hour or $25 an hour. Realize you will grow over time and you will get better. So you'll get to that point. It's just a matter of expertise. I could build a beautiful, gorgeous, one-of-a-kind website for a client, 5-page website in less than a few hours. And that is because I've gone through this process hundreds of times. So I've made these decisions so many times. I know how to design home pages, different sections, all of that. Ideal for the client and who they're trying to reach. Okay, number 6. This one's gonna sound similar, but it's a little bit different. So realize you are selling relative to the client's needs, not just the time invested in the project. Let me explain. Let's say your client needs the site up really quickly. You could charge more for that. Let's say the client needs a really professional, perfect website and not one detail is missed. You could charge for that. Let's say the scope is narrow or wide. You can charge for that. It all depends on who you're working with, point number 2 that we talked about in this video, and also what their needs are. So if they need something up quickly and it's gonna help them land a $10 million deal, again, you're not gonna charge like $100,000 for it, but you can charge more for it in general because the answer to the problem is worth it. Think about Disneyland charging $12 for a bottle of water that you can buy right outside the park for $1. The reason they could do this is because it is a higher value inside the park. So finally, to wrap this one up, you can judge this based on the needs of the business, the timeline, and how valuable the end product is going to be for the client. In this case, in most cases, this is not going to become some crazy amount. But if you're solving a big problem for the business, well, it's well worth it. Next, this one is interesting. We could probably make a whole video on this, but realize that price is a story. Think about this. If I go to Fiverr and they say they can build me a Squarespace website, 5 pages for $199 versus I go to your website and I call you and we're on the phone and you say the price is going to be $5,000 and it's actually a 3-page website. What is the story being told in both of those prices? I haven't referenced any work. I haven't talked about anything else. I haven't talked about location, none of that. Only thing I've referenced is the price, and the price tells a story about what type of work they're gonna get, what it's gonna look like, the experience they're gonna get. Be mindful of that. Again, if you have great customer service, charging a premium is well worth it. Because often, and shout out to everyone on Fiverr, but often you might not get great service from a tool like Fiverr. There will be cultural dynamics that might be hard to understand. You might ask for something, get something different. Things might not be communicated clearly. Things could go in a whole myriad of ways. Yes, you may end up with a site you like, maybe even a site you love. But again, if you get a $5,000 price ticket or a $199 price ticket, you're gonna value those things differently. Now, tip number 8, last tip we're gonna cover. This is how you double your rate. Go through these tips, use these systems for your benefit. And in tip number 8, let's cover this. Realize that price is always a scale. If you only offer your client one price, you are missing out on so many opportunities. Now, let's say this. Remember the first question was, what is your budget? So let's say their budget is $8,000. When I send the proposal, I will send them a range between, let's say, $6,500 to $9,500. Really depends on the client, right? So if they say 8,000 tops, then we know. But if 8,000 is the budget, I will send them a range around that. So if they fall in love with the project halfway through and they want to add new components, they already have a sense of what it's going to cost. See that? We're already working up towards future work, possibly, if it works out. And they also have an idea that the project might cost a little bit less than originally scoped. So I always send a range, and the way I do this is in my proposal, I have all the line items, and then at the final line item, I just say range between $6,500 to $9,500. And then for the total price, it says $8,000, whatever number that is that they agree to. Also, when I do numbers like that, for that total number, all those total numbers, I would probably do the number right below it. So instead of $9,500, it would be $9,450. And then the total price would not be $8,000. It would be $7,950. It just looks like a little bit less. Money psychology. Go to any store, you see the pricing scheme, done. Now, if they didn't give you a budget and you gave them a budget, this is what you can do. I always like to compare websites to a scale. So I use this example, and this was an example I got from Chris at The Future. Let's say you're remodeling your home and you want to buy a new chandelier for your dining room. You can go to Home Depot, spend $100 to $200 and get a great chandelier. You can also go to a boutique and spend $20,000 on a chandelier. At the end of the day, both do the same exact thing. They will light up the room. But the finishing on the $20,000 chandelier is completely different than the $200 chandelier. So it really depends on what type of finishing you want on the website. Do you want it to be cheap, average, or premium? And then in the actual proposal, what I send the client is 3 packages. Ideally with the middle package being the package I want to sell. There's a lot of psychology around this. People often choose the average. So if you give them small, medium, large basically, or cheap, average, and premium, they can choose what they like. Again, keep in mind that the middle is probably what they'll go for. Finally, I do want to give a shout out to Chris at The Future because a lot of these tips came from his YouTube channel. I always recommend it. Always go over there and check out what they're doing at The Future. They have amazing content on the sales process and the business of design. This helped me go from charging $2,000 to $3,000 for a website to easily charging $10,000 to $15,000, all the way up to $20,000 for projects, all of it being on Squarespace. Now, final thing to keep in mind, improving your ability is probably one of the most important parts if you are still an amateur. Yes, you can charge more and be incremental in that, but once you become a professional, your range could vary dramatically. I might do a project for $5,000 because I know it might take me just a few hours to build the whole project, work with the client, make sure they launch successfully and that they are super happy. Or I might charge $15,000 because I can do a project for them that I think is well worth my time and skill set, and at the same time, I want to do that project. It all just really depends on where I want to work and what I want to get done. None of that is based on the actual time investment. It's more so based on the actual output, the business needs, everything we discussed in the video. But keep in mind, if you are a beginner or an amateur just starting out, you may have a good feel for websites, but if you haven't built 5, 10 websites yet, you're still beginning. And even if you've done 10, you're probably an amateur. The first goal while you do all of this is not just about doubling your rate, but it's about getting better, growing your expertise, and building confidence in what you deliver. That will help you charge more again and again and again be highly sought after, and have fun doing what you love. With that, if you got value from today's video, hit that like button. It tells me that you got value from this content. And if you want more content just like this, consider subscribing. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.